You don't fight your disadvantages. You take them and grow into something better. Winky Wright. One of the strangest paradoxes in boxing is the paradox of recognition. How a fighter, once dismissed by the crowd, can, over time, become its favorite. How what was once seen as dull or uninspiring slowly turns into something respected, even admired. There is something almost ironic in watching how often the crowd gets it wrong. Time eventually places everything where it belongs. For the fighters, it stands as the final judge of his craft. For the audience, it becomes light, shifting its angle, allowing us to finally see the talent that had been right in front of us all along. Today, we tell you the story of a boxer who became a living example of this phenomenon. For years, fans found him unexciting. Promoters saw his style as unremarkable, but for his opponents, he was a thorn, impossible to deal with without consequences. An undisputed and underappreciated master of the high guard, Ronald Winky Wright. Ronald Lamont Wright was born on November 26, 1971, in Washington, D.C. His mother was barely 15 years old when he was born. From the very beginning, the responsibility for raising the boy fell on his grandparents. Mary and Marshall Dorsey became Ronald's true foundation. They shaped the calm, grounded nature that would later define him in the ring. At home, he absorbed respect for family, hard work, and simple but unshakable values.
Who was the major influence in your life?
Oh, my grandmother, man. My grandmother was everything. My grandmother raised me, you know what I'm saying, took care of me.
Where was Dad?
My dad, my mom was young when she had me, so I was raised with my grandparents. So my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, my father.
Ronald's famous nickname came from his grandmother as well. As a baby, he had a habit of winking at anyone who caught his attention. He was 2 months younger than his uncle Byron Dorsey, who was nicknamed Weenie. And that's how they grew up together, Wenny and Winky. At the age of 15, the family moved to St. Petersburg, Florida. Contrary to the stereotype, Wright didn't walk into a boxing gym because of anger or poverty. His family wasn't struggling. Winky Wright boxed simply because he loved it. Soon after the move, Ronald walked into a local boxing gym where he met Dan Birmingham, the man who would stay by his side for the entire journey, from his first amateur bouts to the final chapter of his professional career. In the amateurs, Wright frequently crossed paths with Shane Mosley and Oscar De La Hoya, who were already being talked about as rising stars. Winky believed he was their equal. Proving it, however, would be far more difficult.
I started boxing when I was 16. I turned professional when I was 18. So it was 2 years. In that 2 year time, as an amateur, I had like 60 fights. I should have been nominated to go to the 92 Olympic Games. But once I won the 1990 Olympic Festival, you know, I supposed to got to go to the Goodwill Games, but they wouldn't let me go because they said I ain't have enough experience. And I'm like, well, I just beat the number 1 and number 3 guy, so I still should go. But they was like, you know, you need some more experience. So that's when I said, you know what, I'm turning pro. So that's why I turned pro in 1990.
Most talented American boxers build their careers at home. Winky Wright was a rare exception. In search of recognition, he had to take his chances overseas. His career began quietly, almost unnoticed. There was no sense that this road would ever lead to success. Ronald fought at junior middleweight, and the purses for his first 16 bouts in Florida never reached $1,000. Finding a promoter became a necessity, and that was Dan Birmingham's job.
Everybody was spreading around that Wink had asthma. He had weak hands. He didn't like to train. I mean, everything was negative, which wasn't true at all. It was only because a lot of promoters talked to us, a lot of local small promoters, and we wouldn't sign with any of them. So they started spreading rumors about us. I called all the big promoters, Duva, Don King, Bob Arum, but they were all too busy with their big name fighters. I never even got a return phone call.
The last real lead came through a conversation with trainer Art Mayorga. He later told them that in Europe, there were promoters willing to work with Winky, brothers Michael Akari and Louis Akari. In 1993, Wright began his international boxing tour. Over the next 5 years, he traveled the world like a touring musician. Ronald fought in France, Germany, Argentina, South Africa, the United Kingdom, Monte Carlo, even Luxembourg. Winky recalls that stretch with a smile.
Man, I did a lot of travel, a lot of frequent flyer miles.
Constant travel, new languages, changing climates, cheap hotels where holidays felt no different from weekdays. Wright took it all in stride. He treated the road as part of the job. The Akari brothers knew exactly what they were doing. In the US, Wright struggled to make more than $1,000 per fight. In Europe, his work was valued at $5,000 about. In 1994, during his 10th fight abroad, Wright earned his first title shot. His opponent was Julio Cesar Vasquez. The Argentine bulldozer had over 50 professional fights and 8 successful WBA title defenses. By comparison, Ronald had only 2 8-round fights on his record. The experience gap was impossible to ignore.
Ireland, and actually he found himself on the floor that night. So you just wonder with his busy schedule if it's maybe becoming too tough for him. And this is a good...
The fight was so action-packed, it was hard to judge it one way. Ronald won most of the rounds. He outboxed Vasquez at range, held his ground on the inside, and even stood with him in the power exchanges.
He's fairly easy to hit, really, but he just bounces back. He's a rubber ball champ. I think Winky Wright's got the most support among the French crowd anyway. It's a hard early on. Yeah, the crowd like that, the way Wright...
Lovely shot, yep. Vasquez was on the verge of going over there, look. You've really got to hand it to Wright, this is tremendous stuff.
Crowd are rising to it as well.
And this is the first time he's sustained it. I think he actually feels he can force...
On the other hand, he was knocked down so many times that winning on the scorecards became impossible. Winky hit the canvas in the 2nd, 7th, 9th rounds, and twice in the 12th.
Oh, yeah, he really sickened him with that punch. Is he going to stay there?
Shot again.
Oh, yeah, I mean, if there was any doubt, and we don't think there has been, well, that's it in the last round.
As I say, you're not on the floor 4 or 5 times now, 5 times on the floor. Definitely yeah. Vasquez hanging on to his title.
We haven't got the...
To make matters worse, Vasquez himself was knocked down in the 2nd round, but the referee failed to rule it as a knockdown. In the end, Ronald suffered the first loss of his career, dropping a unanimous decision. The defeat didn't slow Wright down. He stayed busy, fighting every 2 or 3 months. Winky was patient and methodical, solving one problem at a time. Sooner or later, they'll have to give me a shot. I just have to beat everyone they put in front of me. By then, Europe had become almost his second home. He was known there. He was respected. Wright had built his own audience, not a massive one, but one that understood what it was watching.
The Europeans, they called me the master boxer. I was beating all their top-notch fighters that they thought was coming up. I'd come over there, I'd beat them. Then I'd come back, beat the next one. And they was like, here come Winky Wright, once again, coming to beat our fighters.
In 1996, Wright briefly returned to the United States. His winning streak hadn't gone unnoticed. Bronco McCart, the reigning WBO champion, was the only title holder at junior middleweight willing to give him a chance. The matchup between two southpaws was highly competitive and entertaining. The challenger won by split decision. Wright and McCart would cross paths again, but on that night, only one thing truly mattered. Winky Wright was a world champion. Historically, boxing has always favored right-handers. Facing a southpaw already disrupts the usual geometry of a fight. When that stance is used intelligently, it becomes a serious tactical advantage. When Ronald first began boxing, Dan Birmingham asked which stance felt more natural to him. Winky answered that he was right-handed, but fought as a lefty, simply because it felt right. From that moment on, the southpaw stance became the foundation of his style. That may be one of the reasons he turned his jab into such a devastating weapon. A boxer without a jab is like a hockey player without a stick. If you ever see a list of the greatest jabs in boxing history, and Winky Wright isn't on it, it's a bad list. Ronald's jab wasn't just a punch, it was a tool of total control. Only Winky Wright could dismantle elite middleweights using nothing but his lead hand. Dan Birmingham played a central role in shaping that style. His instructions were simple: keep your hands high, stay compact, and throw more punches. Ronald himself was fascinated by slick, elusive boxers. I loved watching Pernell Whitaker and Sugar Ray Leonard. I loved their style. I wanted to be a slick boxer with strong defensive skills. I was obsessed with that idea, so I worked endlessly on my defense. Wright entered boxing history as the textbook example of the high guard, what fans often call a blocker. That may be why his style resonated so deeply with European audiences. Often compared to fighters of the German boxing school, Ronald's high guard had crucial differences. The German block is a fortress, a rigid, monolithic shield. Winky Wright's block was a living bastion. Unlike the German school, Wright didn't clench his fists. Wright kept his gloves open, resting his palms on his eyebrows. It gave him a clear visual lane, as if he were looking through binoculars. Wright absorbed the punches with subtle head movements, rolled shots with his torso. Things that fighters like Felix Sturm, Arthur Abraham, and others from that school simply didn't do. He parried with his forearms, redirected punches, and sometimes neutralized shots purely through reflex. That said, the high guard is not a universal solution, and Winky Wright was no exception. This style only works if a boxer gives back more than he takes. Otherwise, the block stops being defensive and becomes a punch magnet. It is also vulnerable against true power punchers. Even the strongest guard struggles against fully committed shots. Like many great fighters, Wright had personality quirks that set him apart. At times, he leaned straight back or threw punches while falling in, breaking fundamental boxing principles. Yet no one ever truly made him pay for it. As the saying goes, don't copy what great fighters do. Some things are allowed only to them. Winky Wright possessed elite ring generalship. He constantly circled, stepping outside his opponent's lead foot. But when he needed to close distance, he didn't step in with the lead foot like most fighters. Instead, he brought his back foot up. Wright had a rare ability to extend his punches, not through reach, but through sharp shoulder rotation. He could touch opponents from extreme range and instantly reset. He was also excellent on the inside, a master of counterpunching and of scoring clean shots while stepping out of close range. If you look at Ronald Wright's amateur fights, you'll see a mobile, free-flowing boxer. During the pre-championship stage of his career, he evolved into a disciplined counterpuncher, operating primarily off the back foot. By the time he reached his prime, Winky Wright had become an aggressive defensive fighter. The same high guard, now paired with constant forward pressure and a high punch work rate. A highly rational style that many mistake for simplicity. Winky didn't decorate his boxing. He redefined it, stripping away the excess and keeping only what produced results. Calling Winky Wright's boxing boring is easy. What's much harder is recognizing the process that led him to his own form of fighting perfection. After winning the title, Ronald Wright's path still led far from home. In the United States, he remained largely invisible.
I didn't have that big promoter to push me. I didn't have the network behind me because I didn't go to the Olympics. So a lot of people still had questions about me.
Wright defended his title 3 times in the UK before traveling to South Africa to fight an undefeated challenger from Namibia. Harry Simon, nicknamed the Terminator, was a relentless machine. This fight is often remembered as one of the most controversial decisions of Winky Wright's career.
Левша и очень неудобный для соперника. Очень хорошую любительскую карьеру, несколько титулов завоевал. Великолепно. 9-й раунд смотрим. Очень непросто Winky Wright. Я бы даже сказал, что намибийца точнее.
It took place in South Africa, and the confusion surrounding the announcement of the verdict only fueled the outrage. First, the result was announced as a draw. Then, after Wright had already returned to the locker room, he was informed that he had lost. For many fans, the episode became a symbol of injustice. But when emotions are set aside and the fight is rewatched objectively, the picture becomes clearer. Simon kept the pace high. Wright, meanwhile, had to conserve energy and pick his shots. For fighters like Ronald Wright, staying behind the high guard against pressure often turns them into a sitting target. It's not enough to just shut down the offense. You've got to fire back. Back then, Winky wasn't the aggressive defensive fighter he would later become. By the late rounds, he looked more tired than Simon. The decision wasn't a robbery, but for Winky, it was undeniably a tough pill to swallow. When his world tour finally wrapped up, Wright returned to the States. The real stage of his career was waiting. The era of big fights. After knocking out Derek Graham, he earned a shot at the IBF title, held by the ferocious Fernando Vargas. The youngest champion in light middleweight history had been dubbed El Rey Prematuro, the king before his time. He quickly became a major box office attraction. In December of '99, Vargas vs. Wright took place, with the champion entering as the clear favorite. The expected script was simple. Fernando would take the center of the ring and dictate the pace. Even in the most general predictions, Wright was supposed to just go the distance. But the moment the bell rang, Wright had Vargas running along the ropes.
So many times that he knows he has to fight aggressively to get decisions. And he is fighting.
Winky Wright was a highly intelligent boxer, and he knew one thing. You don't beat Vargas by waiting. The style he chose was a carefully drilled game plan. Starting with this performance, Ronald Wright's boxing identity shifted him towards that of an aggressive defensive boxer.
Chopping right hand across the top by Wright. Vargas manages to land the left hook. Wright with that broad, well-balanced base, firing his jab and trying to back Vargas up.
Good shot to the rim.
Still, Wright seems to have thrown him back just a little bit with the unexpectedness.
After the fourth round, the arrogance vanished from Vargas's face. In its place were swelling, bruises, and genuine confusion. The combination punching and high tempo on both sides created the illusion of an even contest. But just how much clearer Wright's work was. While Vargas kept pounding on the guard, Ronald was splitting his defense at every level. You want to box at long range? Fine. Mid-range? No problem. Trying to fight inside? He's right there.
And won rounds 2 and 3 clearly. But Fernando came back with that big fourth round. It's a great slugging match toe-to-toe. It's just a matter of who gets some more clean shots. Vargas looking very strong for this.
Vicious right hand to the body by Vargas. Wright, despite continued swelling around both eyes, knocks Vargas hard with the left hand.
And this is what a simple but effective sequence looks like from Winky Wright. He brings his forearms together, blocks Vargas's right hand, and instantly fires back a stiff jab. That night, Winky had the most success with combinations. He finished with a right hook, the classic step outside, the opponent's lead foot, followed by an overhand right. There's no doubt this was the best performance of Winky Wright's career. And if you still question who the real winner was, just look at the fighters' faces. The eyes never lie.
To the IBF Junior Middleweight Champion of the World, Fernando Vargas!
The decision for Vargas was pure business. Too much money had been invested in promoting Fernando. Everyone expected El Niño Feroz to rule the division for years. Then along came this man named Wright, nicknamed Winky, and suddenly, that so-called inevitability didn't feel so certain anymore.
Well, you know, sometimes you got to take the hard path to get to where you at today and to respect where you at today, you know, because if you earn it, nobody can't take it away from you. When you go into a fight where there's a chance that you can lose and people think it's a chance you lose, that's the fight that gets you up and pick you up and drive you to be the best that you can be.
If Winky Wright's journey sounds familiar, that's no coincidence. He was walking the same road once traveled by the great middleweight, marvelous Marvin Hagler. Just like Marvin, he kept knocking on closed doors, and just like Marvin, his patience was finally rewarded. In 2000, Ronald defeated his old acquaintance Bronco McCart. Once again, it was a competitive fight, but this time it ended in a more decisive, unanimous decision for Wright.
Middleweights. As you see right there, ducking the same exact thing. They come down from Alex with 2 rounds to go.
By unanimous decision, fighting out of the blue corner, Ronald Winky Wright.
3 months later, Winky dealt with the tough, old-school grinder, Keith Mullings. And in 2001, he took apart Robert Frazier to become the IBF World Champion. The belt, previously held by Vargas, had passed to Felix Trinidad, but Tito vacated it and moved up to middleweight. Ronald's talent caught the attention of Roy Jones Jr., who offered him a contract. The partnership worked both ways. Roy needed a quality fighter on his undercards. Wright got the exposure he had long lacked in the States. Fighting on Jones's cards, Winky defended his title 4 times, beating Jason Papillion, Juan Carlos Candelo, Angel Hernandez, and his old acquaintance Bronco McCart. Fights that best showcase the evolution of Winky Wright as a fighter.
Each other's styles.
Working with Jones, however, kept Ronald from the spotlight and away from the biggest fights. Wright earned the reputation of a defensive specialist, a fighter nobody wanted to face, a true dark horse. The leader at light middleweight was Shane Mosley. After defeating Oscar De La Hoya for the second time, Shane captured the WBA and WBC belts at 154 pounds. By the end of 2003, Mosley ranked behind only Roy Jones Jr. and Bernard Hopkins on the pound-for-pound list. A $10 million payday was waiting for Shane in a potential super fight with Felix Trinidad. Another fighter might have taken the safe route, but Shane was cut from an old cloth. He reached for the bigger risk instead, choosing Wright. In March 2004, 3 belts were on the line, enough at the time to be considered undisputed, as though WBO title still carried a little weight. Wright had the edge in size and in his command of space, but Mosley was the explosive puncher. That contrast made for a remarkable fight.
Tight defense, and at this stage right now, seems to have the better of the fight because who's got Shane, see, body punch, didn't really get anything on.
There's the hard left hook to the body by Shane Mosley.
And he's banging up against a naturally stronger guy. This is a tough fight for him.
At the start of this video, I mentioned the paradox of recognition. In the fight with Mosley, you could see it clearly. Winky Wright had put together several title defenses, solid wins, but not spectacular performances. Yet, something changed every time he stepped in with elite opposition. In those fights, Ronald exceeded expectations.
Right hand by Wright. Mosley landed the left hook. Wright caught him with a right hook. And crowd chanting, Winky, Winky, Winky.
For a man who had spent years chasing opportunity on foreign soil, hearing his name echo through the stands of Las Vegas against an American legend was a true recognition.
To try to come right back at you when he's been hit. There's another big left hand. And Mosley starts forward to try to attack. Wright takes advantage of the opportunity to hit him again. Pops him with 2 more right hands. Shane wants to answer, but Winky is targeting him.
Wright, a man who famously enjoyed sugary muesli for breakfast, gave Sugar Shane no room to execute a single tactical plan. Attempts to wear him down with power shots failed. Mosley's heavy artillery was bogged down in the defensive bastions of Winky Wright. Ronald, without comparable power, outmatched Shane in accuracy and in his tighter inside work. His counters shut down Mosley's attacks mid-fight. Trying to draw Wright in and bait a mistake didn't work either. This was a case of timing beating speed. Nor could Shane step out of the lead hand. Ronald closed the lane, sliding to his right. The second half of the fight unfolded entirely under Winky Wright's control.
Hard right hand by Mosley, partially blocked by Wright. Wright rips a right hand inside on Shane. Shane gets a chance to fire a left hook and a right cross at Wright.
For the winner by unanimous decision from St. Petersburg, Florida, Ronald.
By becoming the undisputed champion at junior middleweight, Ronald shattered the matchmaker's plans for a Mosley-Trinidad super fight. Shane had the right to a rematch, though few believed he would take the risk. Mosley pressed the button and changed trainers in the process. He entrusted his camp to Joe Goosen instead of his father, who had guided him his entire career. In November 2004, the rematch took place in Las Vegas. Wright earned $1.6 million compared to $750,000 for the first fight. Their first high-level classic made the sequel a commercial success. This time, however, the undisputed crown was not at stake. Wright was stripped of the IBF belt after choosing the Mosley rematch over a mandatory bout with Kasim Uma. Judging by the crowd's reactions, the sequel was even more thrilling. Mosley consciously moved away from sustained pressure and focused more on body punches. Ronald responded by turning up the pressure, denying Mosley any room or time to breathe.
Шейн все-таки останется тем боксером, который уже, называется, сделал себе имя. Дело это бойцы супер-класса. При всей своей скорости какое-то превосходство, пусть мизер, у него появится шанс. Shane.
Wright is often labeled a purely rational fighter. Maybe that's true, but at times, flashes of madness crept into his thinking. Moments where he willingly dropped his guard and tempted fate in front of a devastating puncher. For that moment of madness, Ronald paid the price. Dan Birmingham gave him an earful.
I don't give a fuck! You don't win a big fight that way!
I mean, his whole career flashed before me, all this hard work, and here he's going to drop his hands. And I said, oh my God, it's over. You know, but then he sucked it up and he came back.
With relentless resolve, Mosley and Wright fought through 12 gripping rounds. The rematch was closer and more dangerous than the first, but only because Ronald allowed himself to be drawn into exchanges. Even so, no one questioned the victory of the boxer from St. Petersburg, Florida. That two-fight series became the defining chapter of his career. Wright admits it was Shane who opened the door for him. I've got nothing but respect for Shane. Without him, I'd probably still be fighting on ESPN cards somewhere in West Virginia. In the final stage of his career, only landmark fights awaited Winky. He moved up to middleweight, following Felix Trinidad. The fight was set as a WBC eliminator. Belts or no belts, it didn't matter. Wright versus Trinidad became the highest-grossing event of the year, generating more than $25 million in pay-per-view revenue. Winky earned the largest purse of his career, $4 million.
I feel that Winky Wright really deserves the fight. He deserves the fight because, I mean, he's been fighting for years, 13, 14 years at 154 and dominating. He went all over the world fighting whoever just to get to this point.
Trinidad, fresh off the win of Ricardo Mayorga, was riding high again, but as Winky Wright put it, I am not Mayorga. In May 2005, Winky Wright scored the most one-sided victory ever seen between recognized stars. No, it wasn't a knockout. What he did to Trinidad was much more humiliating. It was the dismantling of a legend live on television. Returning to his corner after the first round, Winky said, "Nah, this guy's got something up his sleeve. It can't be that easy." But Felix wasn't pretending. Trinidad's attempts to impose himself sank into Wright's defense like quicksand. Looking through high guard like binoculars, Wright dissected Trinidad almost casually with one hand.
Continues to do what he wants to do. Left hand over the top of my right. Almost like it's a sparring session.
He's got his hands up so high he's not.
Up with Trinidad. He's still wrong. But after this flurry, circling the wrong way for 3 rounds. Get up, go to your right. Against the guy who's a southpaw.
Occasionally, Wright added combinations, not because he had to, but as if to say, I can do that too. I just don't need to. About 90% of the job was done with the jab. So in the most literal sense, Wright beat Felix Trinidad with one hand. 12 rounds of that steady, punishing jab were enough to push Trinidad into retirement. At the end of 2005, Wright defeated future champion Sam Sullivan in a WBC and IBF eliminator. Ronald climbed to number 2 on the pound-for-pound list, trailing only Mayweather. Winky stood ahead of a formidable group that included Barrera, Hatton, Pacquiao, Morales, and the Marquez brothers. Remarkably, breaking into the elite of world boxing proved harder for Ronald Wright than competing with it. In his fights, it all came down to who would be better at defense. Because, as the sport of boxing ultimately reveals, anyone can throw punches, but only a few know how to walk away untouched. In June 2006, Ronald came to the very edge of history. He faced lineal middleweight champion Jermain Taylor. At stake were the WBC, WBO, and Ring Magazine belts. Another fight that viewers perceived as a robbery. But what really happened in Memphis? As already mentioned, high guards are not universal. A block is not Captain America's shield and can be broken through. Of all Wright's opponents, Jermain Taylor was the most successful at doing this. In this fight, Ronald felt the heavy punch of a true middleweight. Each of Taylor's attacks was delivered with power. They showed the natural strength of a fighter who had grown up in this division. Not the kind that Winky had faced in his fight with Trinidad. This is how Jermain broke through the block with single punches.
Hanging away twice with the right hand.
To go, when it leaves his face, it doesn't have too far to go for Jermain.
And this is how Taylor worked around the block with hooks.
You know, the trading punches, Jermain throws a great three-punch combination, and the power is definitely apparent. According to both.
Still, Wright managed to avoid looking beaten. In fights where everything seemed stacked against him, size, power, and speed, Winky preserved a sense of control. He did it with his trademark patience and an ability to steal space. Winky applied pressure methodically, cutting off the ring. And the moment Jermain found himself in the corner, Wright went to work, clean and efficient.
Harry, I remember something you said about a young heavyweight named Lennox Lewis a long time ago. Taylor actually blocked the right shot there, but now he takes 4 or 5 moves through it. Now Winky Wright tries to put him in jail in the corner again and land the punches that have run.
Taylor and Hopkins. Taylor had that bad cut on the head.
Now blood begins to stream from the right nostril of Jermain Taylor. No way.
That's why the fights had 2 distinct looks. When Jermain had space behind him, it was one-of-a-kind fight. When he was pinned in the corners, it became something entirely different. The fighters were involved in multiple headbutts, and both men suffered swelling over the left eye. But even that didn't take away from how compelling the fight was. After 12 rounds, one judge had it for Taylor, another for Wright, while the third scored it as a fair draw. It was an exceptionally close fight, with neither man able to claim clear superiority. Paradoxes were nothing new in Wright's career. Despite dozens of elite performances, there were always those who labeled him as a boring fighter. In December 2006, Ronald shattered that cliché once again. After years on the road, he finally fought at home in Florida. His opponent was the legendary Ghanaian Ike Quartey, another master of the high guard. What many expected to be a strategic chess match between 2 blockers turned out into a dynamic head-to-head duel with neither man yielding ground in pace or spirit. Scoring 2 knockdowns and throwing over 1,000 punches, Winky Wright claimed victory by unanimous decision. In July 2007, Ronald entered the last super fight of his career against Bernard Hopkins. The bout was contested at a catweight between super middleweight and light heavyweight, though weight limits had never been a deciding factor for Hopkins. Bernard was a boxer who built victories using different, far subtler tools. He didn't try to challenge Winky Wright's style. He simply refused to let it exist. He didn't aim to break the guard. Instead, he created conditions where Wright no longer needed it. Hopkins became the only man to neutralize Winky's jab by stepping outside the lead hand. He never allowed the fight to develop rhythm. He cut off the beginning, erased the continuation, and forced Wright to start over every time. Where Ronald was accustomed to methodically building pressure, Hopkins inserted pauses, clinches, and suffocating rough work. It was a fight without air, not for the audience, but for Winky himself. Ronald lost the strategic battle and fell by unanimous decision. After the fight, the 36-year-old Winky Wright announced his retirement. It was a closing chapter of a magnificent story, though, regrettably, not the final page of a career that would later receive an unexpected and largely unnecessary continuation. Every career is unique. Every path is magnificent in its own way. Winky Wright's career was a complete story, with all its hardships, defeats, and triumphs. Complete for everyone, except Winky himself. For a boxer, the temptation to return never truly fades, especially when he feels that there's something left inside. It seemed that Winky Wright, with his discipline and clear mind, would be able to resist that pull, but he didn't. Ronald never shied away from difficult challenges. Branded as an awkward fighter himself, he often shared the ring with opponents just as uncomfortable. The tall southpaw Bronco McCart, the relentless come-forward Harry Simon, the gritty old-school spoiler Keith Mullings, the ungainly and unorthodox Sam Solomon, and finally, Bernard Hopkins. Awkwardness refined to perfection. In April 2009, Wright faced Paul Williams, a towering southpaw with an endless gas tank. Williams was a fighter most preferred to avoid. At that stage of his career, Winky Wright had no real chance of beating him. In June 2012, Ronald returned once more, this time as a stepping stone for the unbeaten prospect Peter Quillen. These were unnecessary fights. Fights Wright needed only for one reason: to finally understand that his time in the ring had truly passed. In 2017, Winky Wright was inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Outside the ropes, his life found balance and purpose. You may not often hear his name. You won't see him chasing headlines or trending in the news, but that's only because Wright was never drawn to noise. He chose a quieter life. Today, he runs 2 businesses, and neither is about fame or fast money. The first is working with people with disabilities. Wright helps them live independently, outside institutions where the system too often places them by default. He finds homes, builds support, and creates conditions where they exist not as wards of the system, but as people. His second business is real estate. He began by wholesaling properties, then moved into buying, renovating, and selling homes himself. Notably, this was the very same line of work his grandfather once did. When he has free time, Winky is usually on the golf course, genuinely loving the game, for its silence, focus, and the feeling of being fully present. But his best moments are the ones shared with his children. Being a good man is just as important as being a boxer, Wright says. That's what his grandmother taught him, the one who gave him his own name. That may be the most important thing you need to know about Winky Wright as a person. He entered boxing with a set of traits that rarely promise fame or fortune. A slick southpaw, a defensive specialist, a fighter who didn't sell knockouts and wasn't a promoter's dream. And yet, it was from this so-called unmarketable combination that a brilliant career was built. A truly elite craftsman, consistently underestimated. And even now, we still don't fully grasp just how great Winky Wright really was.